So I came across this Princeton thing where they teach algorithms class. It's an old course, but it's a very widely recommended and a standard course. So what they do is they have their own programming model and they do it in Java especially. Since I work as a Java dev and I work with extensively Java, so I just try to explore this. So if you look at it, it's not a standard data structures and algorithms course where you just write the code with simple bullshit, nothing like that. So they have very extensive examples and they have a very well written code, Java style code anyway. You may disagree with it, but it's very Java style and very object oriented. And if you explore some of the examples where programming model, if you see, let me show you just. So let's if you see binary search. Now if you look at this class, how well the code is written. Actually, let me show you this class. Okay, here there is a thing called fundamental. Okay, you can see a binary search regarding sorting, regarding searching, etc. uh, every class is very well written, with clean comments, and this is how clean code will look. If you have a look at this, they have their own package. I'll start 4.jar, and they ask you to add as part of your exercises to your class path. If you see, they have their own. If you see, this is std, so it's their own version of system.out.println, or it's their own writer. It's their own implementation of that writer. So if you see, not this one. So if you look at this one, so this is a simple uh, Java program. You can run this individual file, but you must ensure you have this alx4.jar added to your class path. Here are the instructions you can find. This is the URL. I'm sure it's not too difficult to remember this. So just look at this class. The code transaction is an immutable data type to encapsulate a commercial transaction with the customer name, date, amount. So it's just a simple transaction object. It's a very minimal transaction object where the author is saying it is immutable. And why, you might ask? And transactions should be immutable. It's a record of what happened. Transaction, you cannot change it. You cannot alter it. It's good practice. You may have a immutable version where you have this public and you'll have getters and setter, etc. But this is these authors know very well what they're doing. So it's just your own preference. So I'm not gonna say too much about it. But if you see the documentation about this, and it clearly implements comparable. So which compared to it, then you must override this method. So in this, by default, it will compare the amount, and it will clearly overrides the equals object, where it will compare all three, if it is equal to or not. So generally, without this, if we do equals, it will just compare the addresses of that object. So if you explicitly override this, then you can implement whatever the way you want to. And whenever you override equals, it is a very good practice to override hash code in Java. So there is this some reason that I clearly don't remember, but so if you ever looked at the book Effective Java by Joshua Block, then you will find it there. And if you see other classes like this one, inside the existing class, transaction class only, who order implements, then this will override with who, this will override with when. So you must remember transaction, this class has who, when, amount. how much it will compare the amount. Okay, so if you see, and this also have a constructor, sorry, this has two constructors, which is by default string date when, who, when, amount. Who is the person, which is obviously a string, when is the date, and the amount. And date is by default, they didn't use any custom formatters, and it is not needed. This is extensively written for educational purposes only. That's why you will find heavy comments on every single method. You don't need to write code like this, or you don't need to have this much extra documentation for each piece of line you write. But it's good to have, the core parts of your code, the core parts of your logic is, let's say, if you implemented a batch job or a service class or implementation, or let's say you have written a custom query in your repository class in Spring Boot. So it's good to have this kind of documentation, and it shows that you understand the Java way. So this is not necessarily a good way to do things, and many people in Twitter actually disagree and hate Java and other things, like they like functional programming and stuff. But if you're writing Java, you should write it like Java. You should write idiomatic Java. See, that's why there is a lot of hate, because there are a lot of people who migrate from Java to other languages, and they try to replicate Java in other languages. That's why you would hate. That's why you would find a lot of hate for Java, because simply there are too many people who got started with Java or who migrated out of Java. And so that is why they try to write the other language like Java instead of writing its own idiomatic version. So that's the difference there. So why am I showing you this is, so this is a great example to learn what a record is. As part of Java 17, uh, they introduced something called a record class, which is immutable by default. Every field is private. Okay. So I was looking at this, so I was trying to go through it, rewrite it or something. See, just trying to, I didn't write any comments, of course. So just wanted to see like what the fuss is about, just background. I put some friends or something, and then just just a time pass thing. If you see, it's their own custom std out version of implementation. And if you see, if you trace this one, this is out print writer. If you see system.out.print implementation also, it will be very similar to this one. It just it's just their own wrapper. And a lot of people who write Java tend to do this. After a while, once they understand ifs and buts, they tend to write their own versions of everything, and they tend to create their own versions of libraries and stuff. I mean, this may not be the way. I mean, unless you are maintaining it from start to the end of life, then it's fine. But it becomes a maintainability in the long run. But in this case, this is very clearly documented. But there are instances where I work, it was not clearly documented, and it's a pain in the ass. So when it's clearly documented, you could say it's fine. But not a lot of people do that. So I was doing this. I was like, okay, there is a better way to do this now. Double. Okay. So if you want this class to be immutable, so that's why they introduced something called record. Record is by default immutable, and you define the fields like what you define here. Uh, you will directly define it in this braces right after you define the record. And this can implement the same comparable interface, which will help us in sorting. Why do we implement this comparable? Because it's a good practice, and if you want to uh, sort a collection of transaction records, let's say, it's good to have this default implementation. You can work without this also. See, what you see here is a canonical constructor. Okay. And This is called a canonical constructor, where it will implicitly extend the constructor, and you will just write your validation checks here instead of this manual constructor. You can see here over here. Uh, it will automatically assign the variables that's passed, and you can see. And if you see here, a transaction will be passed as a string here, and it will be passed, and it will be assigned to these variables. And there is a validation check here. Okay, then I thought like in records, in Java records, there should be a way to uh, override or add a new constructor, right? Since it is an immutable class. So turns out when I went for chat GPT, so you can apparently, but you have to use some sort of this, and you have to manually, define additional three methods for these three fields. You have to parse it like this every time you're doing transaction dot split. So this felt I was like, so if transaction record, if a record class supposed to make your life easy by uh, creating an immutable class by default, but if I wanted to override this default constructor, this looks too much boilerplate, why not the old way? So then I was like, it doesn't need to be this way. So I just wrote a static method where it will just, it's a transaction. See how I used it. And by the way, you can do totally, what do we call it? Variable referencing or something. Okay, whatever this is, you can use var, by the way. You should use if you are using Java 17, especially in local context where it makes a lot of sense. So you should use it. It's there for a reason. You should use it. And why not create it this way? Like a singleton in, like where you define a singleton class. If you know singleton, you would do a similar thing to this. See, and these methods are by default when unlike we defined here, right? Where we had to define manually. So okay, here also we can similarly override the compared to, since we are implementing comparable transaction record, and hash code and the equals can also be overridden like this, and we can also do a similar job to this. So so the thing is, uh, what I want to say is, uh, people don't tend to change the way they write Java, and to an extent it is actually very great because it doesn't break backward compatibility, and you can work in a 10-year-old code base, and now you can still figure it out what's happening. Only 10-year-old code base, it sucks a bit because too many people put their hands in it. It obviously does. So, but it's not too much different, and it will work, by the way. It will work. But we should use these new features, right? Because they are introduced for a reason, and you have switch expressions also instead of regular switch case statements. And you have records, you have local inference, local variable inference, where you can use var for local context, without writing boilerplate. And you can use virtual threads also in Java 21. I didn't explore it that much, and apparently it's very good. And so, oh, sorry. I think I put a wrong one here. It should be illegal argument. So this is record. Sometimes some other time I will show you switch expressions in Java actually. So try going through this URL. It's actually very good. Where is this? Yeah, you can go through this URL, this one, and you will find the implementations very Java-esque way, and it will be good for you. You will just learn a bit or two. All right, that's it. I think I'm done.